Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss how the Telegraph are positioning themselves against Nigel Farage's Reform UK party in the wake of the way he's been making Kemi Badenoch look dishonest and without a plan. The Telegraph are worried about Reform UK, but are they right to be? I would argue that Reform UK voters should be a lot more worried about Reform UK than the Telegraph, who will probably get exactly what they want from them. But first, for daily political commentary, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out. So, a piece in the Telegraph, written by one of their deputy editors as well, so it's on brand for them. You're not talking about something written by one of their commentators who can take all sorts of positions. And they're warning about Reform UK. Now, their headline: if Farage succeeds in destroying the Tories, we are doomed to perpetual left-wing rule. So note that they don't think that Reform UK can themselves win an election with the Conservatives out of the way. Either that, or they want their readers to believe that Reform UK couldn't win an election even if the Conservative Party didn't exist. Nor, interestingly, do they want to entertain the notion that the Lib Dems could occupy the void and rise to power one day. Is that because they don't believe it, or they don't want to believe it? Either way, they are completely wrong. If the Conservative Party were to actually cease to exist, right-wing voters would still be there. They don't all dissolve into puddles. And although some might, long-term become non-voters, I guess, because I don't want to vote for anyone, most of them are still going to vote for someone. That someone would either be the Liberal Democrats or Reform UK in terms of the current climate, depending on their specific political priorities. However, it's quite likely that the Conservative Party will not actually be destroyed. I've said time and again, I can't be sure exactly what Reform UK aim to do. What do they exist to do? But I do think it's more likely that they were formed in order to permanently change the nature of the Conservative Party rather than replace it. Now, let me go over why I think this. First of all, Nigel Farage is the main driver behind Reform UK. Even when he took a step back from leadership, he was promoting the party and its talking points in the media. Without him, Reform UK could well decline very quickly. Nigel Farage is 60 years old. Despite his rhetoric and the nonsense that people are coming out with at the moment, he's not going to win the next election. Even the current polling, which is based on a Labour government which doesn't seem to even care about popularity right now and have not yet implemented any of their plans, does not give Reform UK a snowball's chance in hell of forming even a coalition government. Like the latest polling, even the MRP poll that's come out just this week, which is the most accurate poll we've had so far in recent times. People say, oh, this would be a collapse of Labour support. Yeah, absolutely. Does not give Reform UK any route to Downing Street. And although some of Labour's plans are challenging, they're not guaranteed, there are others that are absolutely going to be delivered, and they're absolutely going to result in improvements. Labour are going to be seen to be improving things in a few years' time. The main question hanging over the next election is how well will they be able to deliver and seen to deliver, and what size win can they get? And if Labour can really deliver in these next 5 years, against a backdrop of a Trump presidency, China and Russia trying to take advantage, the Middle East still on fire, then there's reason to be optimistic that maybe the next term could be calmer on the world stage and they can focus much more on what they have agency over. The chances are that Labour will be able to deliver their decade of renewal and be in good shape to win a third election. Now, this is speculation, of course. I'm not saying it's certain. I am saying it's likely. And the real Reform UK plan has to be based on realistic outcomes. Nigel Farage may deny reality in public. He does so on a regular basis. But he did not become a political success by denying reality to himself. His Reform UK strategy will have to be based on the idea that Labour could be in power for over 10 years. It's not certain, but there is a strong possibility. But let's imagine a parallel pathway, that in this time that Labour are delivering and the public are happy enough with them to keep them in government, Reform UK actually do destroy the Tories. Let us just say, as the Telegraph fear. Well, by the time Reform UK have that realistic shot at the election where Labour are delivering smaller and smaller gains, and so people are going, oh, maybe they're running out of ideas. Whether true or not, Nigel Farage will be in his 70s. Now, the same will be true of Starmer, of course, but I'd expect him to be gone by then. The Labour Party does not rely on a single figure, and it will move on. They may still choose an idiot to put in charge next, but they will have options, and they have the option of taking having a leader that will actually take them on to greater things. But how much do Reform UK rely on Farage? And if you're thinking, well, Phil, but Trump's well into his 70s, like he's going to be 80 before long, and he's just about to form another government. Yeah, Farage smokes like a chimney and drinks like a fish. Despite Trump's love of burgers, ketchup and cola, he has a healthier lifestyle than Farage. He neither drinks nor smokes. Also, after the election, when a journalist asked Farage if he would now turn Reform UK into a proper political party, he asked if there was really any need. He was very reticent about it. Well, if Reform UK are to become a potentially election-winning machine for the long term, they are going to need to turn themselves into a proper party. Of course, it's now their official policy to become a proper party, not a limited company which Farage owns 60% of the shares in. This is driven by the new party chair, Zia Yusuf. So this could give the impression that the party are building for the long-term future. And maybe they are. But I still remember Farage's reluctance as recently as this summer when asked about it. And I've seen no sign that it's happening, despite the fact they have a policy to make it happen. Where's the evidence it's actually happening? In fact, with Reform UK's recently advertised membership numbers, Farage may feel he can have the best of both worlds. If lots of people are prepared to pay to be the party's volunteer force, going knocking on doors, stuff like paying for the privilege and having absolutely no membership rights in return, he may well keep Reform UK as his own personal property. And this is why I think Reform UK exists to reform, not the country, well, not directly, but the Conservative Party. And I really don't know why the Telegraph fear this. And there is precedent for what might happen. Earlier this year, before the election, there was a lot of talk about Canada 1993. Now, this was because of two features. The first is that in Canada 1993, the ruling Conservative Party completely collapsed, almost out of all existence. The second was because their vote was split with a party that had previously been a bit player called Reform. But although the Conservatives in the UK collapsed to their worst ever defeat this year, it was nothing like Canada 1993 humiliation. But that doesn't mean Canada holds no more lessons from history. So shall we see what happened afterwards? So at the following election, 1997, the Conservatives recovered a little. They won a few extra seats, but they were still nowhere. But Reform also won more seats. These were now the sort of dominant party on the right, you might say. Now, neither was in a position to form a government, however, together or individually. The following election, the Conservatives lost more seats, but Reform gained some more. But they weren't called Reform anymore. A merger took place. Reform and some Conservatives merged into a new party called the United Alliance. This is why, despite 7 years in opposition at the time, the former ruling Conservative Party actually lost seats. But this new Reform-based party still wasn't gaining momentum towards being able to form a government. It was just preventing the Conservatives from rebuilding. Much as the Telegraph fears will happen in the UK. 2004 got interesting. The down-and-out Conservative Party merged with Alliance, which, remember, itself was formed from Reform and some former Conservatives. They became a new Conservative Party in 2003. And then they won the largest share of seats at the election the following year. Not enough, not an outright majority, but they won. So at this point, the Conservative Party that was down and out had now merged with Reform. It was one entity. And after a few more years of being the largest party, they then won an outright majority in 2011. This new Conservative Party is further to the right compared to the previous version. Reform effectively succeeded in sculpting a new Conservative Party, one which dropped its more progressive attitudes. Which is exactly what I think Reform UK want to do with the Conservative Party. Boris Johnson already began the process by jettisoning some of his more moderate personalities. And although those in the party are encouraged to question all sorts of policies, the unholy Brexit shall be revered at all times. The Conservative Party has already begun to undergo a change. And if Canada has lessons for us, we could imagine that Reform UK can indeed permanently change the nature of it still further. And once that merger is complete, the right-wing votes, once again sewn up, there'll be no splitting of it, but the left-wing vote will continue to be split, and actually probably even worse than we've been used to, because it has become already more fragmented. And we may then, as a result, if we do not get electoral reform, end up with the UK being run by a Conservative government for almost all of the time, just as has always been the case, only this time further to the right. And it could all happen within the next 10 to 15 years, during which time the Tories are probably out for the count with or without Reform UK. So I'm genuinely confused as to why the Telegraph is so worried about this. It's the rest of us who should be concerned. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, please click the like button and subscribe for further content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can click the join button for memberships. Thanks for listening. And until next time, I'll see you later.